on telling everyone I've got this great bank of lights behind me, so I know when we're going to go fully live onto all the streams. Everyone, it's Women in Food and Farming. As we wait for all the streams to go live, hello everyone. Special hello to Helen. Helen, say hello to everyone.
Hi everyone, nice to see you.
And we've got Beverly. Say hello, Beverly.
Hi everyone, good to see you all.
And Beverly's in her very new posh offices in G's, and she's invited us all to have a look, haven't you, Beverly?
Yeah, I'll walk around with the camera later. I usually have it on the wrong direction anyway.
And Debbie's up in Shropshire. How's Shropshire, Debbie?
Wonderful, great weather, apart from no rain.
Excellent. And we think Christine's in Portugal. Can you confirm?
No,
Christine?
no, I'm in Macclesfield, and it has rained almost all day today.
Oh no!
The colour of my grass. I think I should be cutting it and giving it to everybody else. We just get rain here. If ever, I never checked. I swore I'm never going to buy another house without actually checking the weather before we move somewhere.
Make sure it's not on the bottom of a hole for the weather, and it's also got decent internet. And everyone, we're just in the green room, and we were comparing what's surrounding us. Helen, we'll come on to you in a minute because you've got a lovely background where you are. I've got the window open here, and I've got a buzzard. I've got a massive buzzard on the farm site that we're on that's feeding its young. So if you see me doing this, you know what's going on. I'm being attacked by buzzards. Helen, just describe the scene that you got to your left window and your right window, because that was lovely.
Yeah, so out of that way I can see a combine back and forth. I'm not quite sure what the crop is, but on that side they've combined the wheat, and then yesterday there was a muck spreader going back and forth, and then we had a huge flock of Canada geese come and spend the night on that stubble field. So whether they were finding something in the muck or just the grain that had spilt, so that was nice. They've all taken off now and gone somewhere else.
Excellent. And Beverly, come on, give us a postcard from G's at Barwick. What can you see out of your window? What's going on with your incredible business today?
Out of my window, I can see organic harvest. I can see a reservoir and Ely Cathedral.
Oh wow! Okay. And what are you harvesting organic wise?
So that's Little Gem. Is
it okay?
Yeah.
Ooh,
just outside of the window.
Okay, and Debbie, I hoping you haven't got rain like Christine hasn't in Macclesfield. What can you see out of your windows, please?
Oh, I can see green grass and two horses trying to eat it at the moment, and they probably need moving on.
Excellent. Do these horses have names? We will start everyone in a minute, probably.
Holly and Dolly.
Of course, it's Holly and Dolly. Better than Benson and Hedges or Smash and Cress. Right, who's going to start this? Christine, tell everyone about Women in Food and Farming before we do the big rah-rah for Helen, please. Christine, over to you.
Women in Food and Farming's been going for about 12 years, and all we used to be was we'd meet up 3 times a year in London, largely because it was accessible to everybody, not because we necessarily wanted to be London-centric. And people used to come considerable distances, and I went to a lot of effort to try and get people who were under 30 to come whenever we could. If we got a sponsor, it would be free to under 30s. And we would generally have a speaker, and we would all just chat and network, and it was all women. A lot of us, were sort of further on in our careers, and others were obviously quite new. And it was just people realizing that these people that they read about in Farmers Weekly or whatever else, they could go and have a chat with them about all sorts of things. So it was really trying to encourage people and to say that it can be very lonely being a woman in food and farming, and that when you suddenly get them all together and there's 150 of you, and the noise was just but you and everybody's just nattering, you don't feel alone anymore, and you make instant friends and instant connections, and if you need career advice, there's someone you can talk to. I felt like it was always my party, and people might say, I'm really interested in going and doing such. Oh, I've got just the person, let's take you over here. So really what we're doing now is trying to have some sort of continuation of it that during COVID, where since November 20 we've had monthly meetups. It was on Zoom, and we used to get lots of people in, and we used to try and put them into breakout rooms, but that's rather fizzled out. But people listening to our speakers and us having a bit of a natter beforehand, it seems to be very popular, whether they're watching it on LinkedIn or Facebook, or they watch it later on. And I think we all try and tweet about it so people can get links. And we've had a vast range of topics, some of it on personal style, and some of people who are experts in their area, like Helen is today. And We are planning to have a get together in September, and I will have the date ready before the end of the meeting. I do know it, but it's at Savills, so we're going to do one of the get togethers again.
I've got down the 26th of September.
26th of September at Savills in London. They've kindly allowed us to have their room for free, which means that, you know, what people are paying for, it's going to be £30, just covers the cost of the drink and the food. And we will just get together and sort of carry on that whole vibe, because it does seem to be extremely valuable particularly to younger people in the industry. And I think those of us who've got a bit more experience just love people asking us for our views and opinions and for any assistance.
Excellent. I've just had a WhatsApp. Does that mean if you're going back to in-person events that you're going to sack Max?
I think what's been wonderful about these virtual events or our monthly talks is that we've had people from all over the UK, and surprisingly, and I think it's largely your connections, Max, we've had people from all over the world. And actually one of our was somebody that you recommended from India who ran a great cooperative or great
that's right
business anyway, who asked me afterwards how to get into G's, by the way, Beverly. I'm not sure whether that came to any use, but I gave her some contacts. But and so I think, you know, that they are never going to be able to come to London. So I think that if there is still a demand for us to be doing these monthly ones, we will continue and possibly do it without you, Max, because not only do you provide the medium and you've got a vast network to promote it out to, but it's rather fun having you holding it all together. And
I was trying to explain to someone the other day that I host this amazing ladies group, Women in Food and Farming, and it always seems to be me with 150 women. And I sort of trying to get my head around that. That's I enjoy it, and I think that all the good that we got out of this in the respect of keeping everyone linked in together, and as you mentioned, Christine, about that the overseas connections. That's the beauty of this type of conversation, that we are not parochial to just 40 miles around Beverly and I in Ealing, Bury St Edmunds. We could be global with it. And I must look at the stats at some point. I did at some point ago, there was 32 different countries have dialed into Women in Food and Farming in previous broadcasts. So the reach is tremendous.
And I just think it'd be such a shame to lose all that's been achieved just and go back to some 3 events a year in London. So I think we'd probably carry on with doing and have 1 event a year.
Okay, so everyone, we've just had a mini committee meeting, and we seem to be rolling with this as normal, make it up as we go along. But listen, everyone, we must kick on. We've got the amazing Helen on, and we've got to find out all about her. So shall we look to be a bit professional? Christine, Beverly, Debbie, can you just turn off your feeds, your videos, and guys, girls, ladies, I'm going to call you back in at the end, because you'll have some really interesting questions for Helen. Helen, I'm just going to throw it over to yourself, please. Could you just introduce yourself to the UK, to the world?
Yes. So I work for the National Farmers Union, and I can explain what that is in a moment. And I'm the Chief Advisor for Science and Regulatory Affairs. Okay. At the NFU.
And what I'm going to do, Helen, especially for the people on the on the podcast, I've only been doing this 2.5 years. I just want to give a bit more background, because they really love the detail of it. So here we go. Women in Food and Farming, August broadcast with guest speaker, Dr. Helen Ferrier, Chief Science and Regulatory Affairs Advisor at the NFU. Helen leads the NFU's policy and advocacy work on agriculture and horticultural science and research, biotechnology, data and food safety on behalf of the NFU's 55,000 members in England and Wales. Based at the NFU headquarters in Warwickshire, she leads a policy team covering plant health and crop protection, farm safety, skills and training, transport, labour and employment. Wow. Helen is also non-executive director of NIAB, chair of the Crop Science Centre Alliance Board, and is a member of many other groups and panels in the agri-food and research community. Before joining the NFU in 2004, Helen was a research scientist at Imperial College London, working on a probabilistic modelling of dietary exposure to pesticides. She has an academic background in environment and health, human health, epidemiology, and environmental science. I've murdered some of those words there, Helen, but in a nutshell, does that summarise you?
Yes, yeah, definitely. That's where I've come from.
And Helen, what was your background beforehand? Because to not be patronising, to get to where you are now, there's sort of I don't want to say pinnacle, because there's a lot more chapters in your book yet to come. But you're at such an important position within the NFU. let's go back to basics. What's your family background? Are you from a farming family, or did you come from go on, tell us.
No, not a farming family. So just, but you know, grew up. Actually, this where I am now is where I was brought home from the hospital 45 years ago. So very rural area of the country, but not a farming background. I was just, I guess, always interested in science, but not the kind of pure, maybe geeky end of science, but more how it actually applies to what's going on around us. So I was really keen when I was looking at kind of where to go to university, I guess, to do something that wasn't just a pure science subject, but that was very interdisciplinary. And I went to University of East Anglia for my first degree, and that was so it was one of the first places that did an environmental science degree, a really interdisciplinary degree, which I really enjoyed, and then went on to do a master's at Imperial College in environmental technology, again very interdisciplinary, and I was really keen. I was keen to go to Imperial, partly because of the rowing. So
excellent.
So I will admit now that I took a master's that I thought I could do quite well alongside the rigours of a lot of rowing training, which is what I did. I
love that, Helen. I love that you're so blatantly honest. That I went to Imperial College for the academia, nothing else. No, not the rowing or the social life that went with it. That's fantastic. Yeah. And obviously on the rowing, you were very successful, weren't you? Because you made it to the Olympics, didn't you?
Well, I have to say, I did row with several people that went to the Olympics.
Seriously?
So it was at quite a high level, which meant I was burning the candle at both ends, definitely, while I was doing my masters. But you know, I'd highly recommend that when you have the energy of youth. So and then then I wanted to. I thought again, to be frank and open with everybody, my sister is a doctor, a medical doctor, and I am quite squeamish and thought, well, I can't be a medical doctor, but I'd quite like to be a doctor, so I'll do a PhD. But my PhD was at Imperial College as well, and was actually I did it kind of part-time in a way. So I was also doing some lecturing on the MSc course that I did myself, environmental technology. But it was very again interdisciplinary. But I think I found with doing a PhD that I was kind of knowing more and more about less and less. Okay. and I thought I probably don't want to stay in academia by the end of my my time as a research assistant and PhD student at Imperial.
Okay,
so that was the point.
So we have. Sorry, Helen, we have a number of students dialed in from the UK or overseas, as we sort of intimated in earlier. When you got to the end of your PhD, did you have sort of three options to look at academia, I don't know, agriculture, or how did that work? How did you end up where you are now?
Yeah, well, I did. I mean, there's definitely the option to stay in academia, which I kind of ended up thinking I didn't really want to do, because I mean, I'm sure, you know, it's probably even more so now, but a lot of time is spent trying to get funding, which wasn't really what I was excited about. And so, I just was looking around for jobs, to be honest. And these couple of jobs came up at the NFU. And as I was doing my PhD was, you know, continuing with my interest in the kind of interaction between humans and the environment, and particularly human health and the environment. And the job I got at the NFU was called Food Science Advisor. It doesn't exist anymore, but that was back in 2004. And you know, that fitted with the kind of interaction of the environment, food, and people's health and the production of food. So that's. Helen
just had a WhatsApp, because so many of us have got lovely recollections sections of the NFU. When I finished college, my first job was with the NFU as a group secretary. Which office was Helen based in? Was she based in London, or had they already relocated to Stoneleigh?
I was in London.
Really? The old office. Sorry, the old office or the newish office in Covent Garden?
Shaftesbury Avenue. Yeah, the last office, I guess, in London, in near Covent Garden. But I knew when I applied that they would be relocating, because I didn't really want to. Part of the other reason to kind of change and move on from Imperial was that I didn't want to live in London anymore. I'm not really a city person. I was keen that there was a job that was moving, and it was moving back to the Midlands, and I like the Midlands. So that's why I applied.
I can imagine that interview at the NFU when they say, Helen, have you any questions of us? Yes, I understand that you're relocating, but where you're relocating, is there a nice long straight river?
Yes, exactly.
No, we've never been asked that one before.
Yes. Where can I row? Exactly.
So you get into the NFU. First impressions of the NFU in 2004?
Yeah, I mean, really different from now. I sometimes think back to then and compare it to the way we work now. But also a lot of similarities in terms of, I mean, the differences are a lot of, how we communicate with each other and how we do our work. I didn't have a laptop or a mobile phone when we started. I remember really clearly the message, the email that came round from the kind of the bosses saying, you can either have a phone or a laptop. You decide one or the other. So those kinds of things are very different, but what's the same is the fact that it's an interaction between our members and the specialist staff. So that's kind of that's how we operate. Lots of change in terms of the kind of focus and for example, our communications department has massively increased. We've brought a lot of kind of bits of the organisation together into headquarters in terms of our kind of professional services. So we're able to be all kind of in one building, and some areas have developed. But I guess my first impressions were there's such a huge variety of things to get involved in, and that's what's kept me there all this time.
Is it really? Because I've got to admit, if you remember the colloquial story about how the NFU was created in the first place, what was it? Was it 6 farmers at a was it a puppy show or something?
Well, I don't know. There's something about a meeting in Islington, which I always think is quite funny. Which is actually when I was living in London, I was living near Islington. In some meeting in Islington Town Hall, which I thought was quite amusing. But yeah,
so they created it with that community, that farming community in mind. And you look where it is today, and all the changes that you've seen since 2004. And crikey, you think of all the changes and coming over the next 20-30 years, let alone in communication, let alone in where do we start? Sustainability, carbon neutrality, regen ag. So you and your colleagues, you've had to be very fleet of foot to be relevant, because you've got to be relevant to your members, because otherwise they're not going to pay, they're not going to engage. And likewise, you need to be relevant to the outside world. To me, I always pick on Tom Bradshaw, the vice president, because he's so good. He's such a great orator, and when I interview people like him, it sort of makes me proud to know that we've got those sort of individuals in the NFU, but they're only as good as they are because of the likes of yourself. So let's dig into that policy development, policy making within the NFU. Just hold our hand on that. How does that work? How does that structure work internally?
Yeah. So that's the area of the NFU that I work in, our policy directorate, because we've also got a lot of, as I mentioned, professional services and communications and our kind of membership services. But policy is really the heart of the organisation as an advocacy organisation. And really what we're doing is trying to kind of create the conditions for our members, for farmers and growers, to be able to run their businesses in a kind of resilient and profitable and sustainable way. So we often say we don't tell them what to farm or how to farm. We create those conditions, and we look at what's required for that. So we look at how to break down any barriers that might exist, how to make sure that there are the opportunities that that they need. And we can go into that, but we basically look at where we can influence as staff members, where we can influence to make sure that, for example, regulations are proportionate and enabling and fit for purpose, and actually work in terms of the commercial realities of a farm business. We might look at supply chain relationships, and obviously Christine very much aware of that in terms of the grocery code adjudicator role. That's a kind of something that was a battle for many years, that the NFU was taking part in. And then we look at any kind of strategy or plans that any organisation that has an impact on farm businesses that is being developed. We try to get involved in that process. Obviously, a lot of that is working with government and with all the various agencies and organisations related to government, but many other parts of the supply chain or organisations that are influencing farming, we try to work with them and influence for the benefit of our members. So a lot of it, it's so much of it is about talking to our members about what's going on, getting their input from the practical commercial standpoint, and then talking to the people that are kind of making the decisions that are going to impact farmers. There are various processes within that, but that's basically what policy is. Policy making and development.
And Helen, just how the NFU has changed since 2004, since you joined, and you've also morphed within the business to your current role. Have you found farmers have also changed in that? Have they got more, I don't want to say more professional, have they got more business-like than perhaps they were 20, 30 years ago? And as such, you've had to guide your advice. You've had to be more succinct and be more directed by them. Have farmers changed?
Yeah, I mean, in many ways, no. So what in terms of the core business and what drives people to be a farmer, I mean that has remained for many of them. But I think that the context for the answer to your question is that it's such a varied industry. I mean, it's just incredible. Even obviously between sectors there are a lot of kind of differences in terms of farming systems, but within an individual farming sector, or just the way different farmers produce the same crop or run what you might think of as a similar business, huge variation in that. But also, which is the kind of people element of the job, which I find really interesting, is just that remembering that farmers are people, they're just individuals who have different approaches to life. They have different tolerances for risk. They have different views and different feelings about why they're doing what they're doing. But I think ultimately the nature of farming is that for many people it's their way of life. It's not a job. As such.
And Helen, likewise, I imagine your inbox must be eclectic. And that said, just look at the makeup of people that we've just had on. We've got Beverly, who's part of a £500 million fresh produce sector. We got Debbie with sheep up in Shropshire and horses. You got so do you have to be a master of all sectors, because you've got everything coming at you?
Yeah, and that's, you know, that's the massive challenge with the role, and with our roles, particularly in the department I'm in, is the cross-sector department within policy. So we have another department that focuses on the individual sectors with small teams for each sector, whereas my colleagues in our land use and innovation department, we cover all of those sectors, and it's actually very, you know, we do have our specialist areas, and you know, the audience will have heard from your introduction the breadth of the specialist areas within my team. So, you know, transport, for example, and dealing with, you know, or dealing with pesticides. But for my particular role, I couldn't possibly know about all the projects, all the research projects that are going in within agriculture, or understand all the different technologies that are used within agriculture. So what it requires for my role is to remember that you don't have to know everything.
Yeah.
But what you need to know is who to ask.
Yeah.
And the ability to network and establish those relationships and meet people, that's what makes it possible to do my job. And luckily, and that's why I've been there for so long, that's the bit that I really enjoy, is making those relationships and building my network, and getting to know people. And
that's why I always love, admire people like you, and I want especially the younger generation to learn from you, because and it's not time to be modest. I bet that you could with a moment's notice stand on a stage in front of a bunch of dairy farmers, a bunch of pig farmers, a bunch of arable farmers, and talk to them on matters of the day, so that they get a good understanding of not only you but the NFU and the general direction. And yes, if you get thrown any curveball questions, you'll be able to there'll be one of the team behind that will be able to help. I think that's where the NFU, and let alone the press, so you must so you have to be very, very fleet of foot, that comes that expression again, and be very erudite on that basis.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it's and what you also get in a room full of our members, and we do we do a lot of meetings, as well as the kind of meetings that we have with stakeholders and, you know, conferences and things like that. We also do a lot of meetings with our members out in the regions, and, you know, like with group secretaries and so on, and you never know really who you've got in the room, and you don't know where they're coming from in terms of, you know, what's worrying them on that particular day. But it's really important, because we're a membership organisation, we have to understand our members and kind of do what they need, even if we're not always doing what they might want individually, or even if we're coming across issues where we have really divergent opinions on things. We have to take that understanding of what the industry needs to translate that into the messages that we're giving to decision makers and policy makers. And that can be, you know, that can be very difficult, because people have very, very diverse circumstances. But that's the challenge. And then, of course, that's us as staff. But our structure is a democratic one. So every 2 years, our president, deputy president, vice president, and then we have our office in Wales with their president and deputy president. They are elected every 2 years, and there's a vote. All of our members and through county representatives vote our office holders in. So there's a political, with a small p, element there, that they are representing their constituents, and so, you know, that is another kind of factor in the work we do. We're not a think tank in that way. We are accountable to, and our office holders are accountable to our members.
But isn't that another reason why the NFU is so fresh and dynamic? Because you have to keep on changing, evolving. especially with if it's the right expression, the electoral system that you have, you can't be, not that you ever would be as a group, but you can't be complacent because you've got that structure in place. So I think I'm sure it's very pressurized, but it's also very healthy.
Yes, I think so, and I think it means that we're kind of reflecting what's going on in the industry very closely, and it means that we have to understand the issues, but it is a challenge. But I think it also means, because we've got that structure, we've got that structure, but we also have the staff behind, as you mentioned earlier, in terms of reference to Tom Bradshaw, that we can make sure that we are sticking with, and it's obviously something very important to me, sticking with the evidence, so that we are actually, when we're doing our policy work, we're doing it in a kind of analytical and evidence-based way. Because what's really, really important when you're trying to influence government or anybody else is that you have the respect and maintain the reputation for being a reasonable people to deal with, who are interested in the evidence, rather than being just a kind of shouty group of people that, so that, to me, that's my personal view of why the NFU is as strong as it is.
And Helen, that leads me on to thank you, Helen. That leads me on to the next question that just came in from WhatsApp. I totally agree with Helen that farmers haven't really changed over the years. Can you ask Helen, have governments changed over the years? Where do we start?
The level, the kind of level of incompetence currently, I don't know whether there's ever been that before. It's
I'm going to put words in your mouth. It just feels like let me say it feels like we're in a zombie government at the moment. We've got two individuals who are going to vying to be Prime Minister of the Tory party, claiming they're going to fix everything, but they were senior cabinet leaders in the government where we might have had some issues.
Exactly. There's it's very difficult to navigate. It's difficult. I think generally it's difficult if there's a high turnover of ministers within DEFRA, and there has been. I can't remember the figure that our president uses in terms of the number of secretaries of state she's dealt with and her predecessors have dealt with. But what I've seen over the last 18 years is how much of a difference it makes who's in charge of DEFRA, for example, and the tone that then sets within the whole department. And of course you do have a massive turnover of civil servants as well, which can be very problematic, but how the tone is set, and I think that obviously goes beyond our department, as you might call it. Obviously the tone is set by Prime Minister, and that makes a massive difference, but we've definitely seen that. What's been interesting actually, and particularly in areas that I've dealt with, for example biotechnology, is that you can't always predict what the colour of government will mean in terms of their view on agriculture, and we've had positive and negative experiences with both Labour and Conservative governments, and differing views on specific issues depending on whether they're in opposition, whether they're in power, because obviously in opposition you can kind of say what you like. It's very interesting.
I'm just going to say this is my personal view, or sounding of an individual. I quite admire Lord Heseltine. It's quite often wheeled out for his political views, and as he states, he hasn't been actively involved in Parliament for the last 20 years. But his view is that we need someone in who is actually going to change Whitehall and the civil service, because it's the Whitehall and the civil service that are the blockers. It's like the turkeys voting for Christmas. They're very slow and very ponderous, and we've had enough examples of seeing that with some projects that we've seen in the likes of the fresh produce sector, that it's the civil service that don't want to move or don't want to move at pace. So Lord Hestine states, we need this robust individual who can look to change things, and unfortunately it's none of the individuals currently vying for the leader of the Conservative Party to become prime minister. But that aside, again, all credit to yourself and your colleagues, because it just feels like you've got this football, you've got this goal, and the goal just is constantly moving. It's not just left and right; it's up and down. But you've done this so well for since 2004. But presumably you just keep going, knowing that the only thing that you can predict is change. You just got to keep going.
Exactly, and I think coming back to the evidence, I think if you stick with understanding and pushing the evidence, and also engaging with people. So whoever, basically you have to work with whoever you've got, and there will be very different characters. I just think of, over the years, all the different chief scientific advisors in DEFRA. All of them have been such different characters, and you have to work with what you've got, and you have to find those ways to build relationships, because I really think that's the way to make change, is to build relationships with people, understand where they're coming from. And that's how you do it. And
again, you look at yourself, you look at Manette, you look at Tom. Just segue, because we were talking about this when we caught up pre this broadcast, science and policy making, and you really like that element. What is that link between science and policy making? Because as we were talking about, the government at the moment is all bit shouty. With yourself, it must be fascinating, but also quite difficult to link those two up, especially when you've got that churn of people, whether it be within government or elsewhere. Why do you enjoy that element of your role?
I mean the variety is good. As I said, I think academia, obviously a lot of people love getting really, really heavy deep into things, and I can understand that, but for me, I like having that overview, and I like being able to talk to a lot of scientists and go around and look at what they're doing and then kind of leave them to it, and also I think that it's turning the science into something real. Obviously the science is real, but turning the science into something that can make a difference to somebody other than another scientist. Because I really, the challenge there is that the lag time between doing the sleness in your lab or wherever it is and that making a difference can be a huge amount of time. It can be decades and decades, and lots of, plenty of examples of all different areas of science on that. But ultimately, I think there isn't. For me, the value is in actually impacting something beyond academia, and also the decisions that people. I'm very much, my view generally of life is that when you do something, there should be kind of a reason for doing it, and some kind of evidence with a very small e, that you think that by doing something in a certain way you will get an impact. And so when I see rules being made or guidance being developed, or kind of all of these schemes that are being developed under the post-Brexit future farming and countryside programme, if all of those kind of principles and guidance and incentives aren't based on an understanding of the system, which you've managed to get because of some kind of scientific research, could be decades ago, it's not going to achieve the outcome that you want. It's not going to deliver the policy, whether that policy is more birds or water protection or clean air or whatever. It needs to be based on something, and so that's that's why I enjoy it, because it feels like it's science being turned into something that's going to improve things.
So are you a bit like a catalyst that some scientists that I know are hugely intelligent, but perhaps not the best at presenting their findings and how that could be a benefit. So you get that, and you also can use that platform of the NFU and your connections to educate, whether that be government or the general public or the trade in general. Would that be a good description to accuse you of being that catalyst between science and the NFU and externally?
Yes, yeah, to a degree, and I think it's important to, something I argue with in terms of influencing funders is to recognise those within the science community that are good and keen on communicating with the non-academic audience. And of course, you need, like in any sector, you need all the variety, you need all the different types of people and the different skills. But those skills within academia haven't traditionally been recognised and incentivised and rewarded through an academic career. But for agricultural science and for a sector like agriculture, you need those people to be there, to be attracted into the sector, and then to be rewarded and brought through because of the nature of our sector.
So come on, Helen, nuts and bolts. What do research funders and providers need to do then to achieve greater impact from the research? What does industry need to do to help them?
Yeah, I mean, I think a big part of it is what we call knowledge exchange, and it's kind of the new version. People used to talk about knowledge transfer, didn't they? Which was very much a kind of one way. We're the experts, and we're going to tell you what to do. I think knowledge exchange, or kind of extension and the development end of R&D, that needs really proper funding, proper mechanisms, ways to get the evidence that's being generated to far more farmers and growers than you can do just by kind of individual project by project funding system. The return on investment isn't going to be there if you're just focusing project by project, because an individual farm business like G's, for example, will be able to benefit from a project that they get involved in, that they maybe co-fund, because there's a lot of this kind of collaborative R&D funding that they put in a lot of effort in terms of in-kind contribution, and then G's will benefit from that, which is brilliant for G's, but it won't. The results of that either won't ever get to the rest of the industry, or it'll take a very long time. And so what I think needs to happen is there to be some kind of mechanism for all of that evidence to be gathered together, to then be put into an accessible form, so that people making decisions on farm can access it and can use, and it's not about accessing a scientific paper in a journal. It's about science being translated into something that's actually usable by a decision maker. And people might have heard of what works centres, for example. So, but they might not have heard of what works centres. They might have heard of NICE, which is a kind of what works centre for the medical profession, where all the evidence that is generated is turned into guidelines, which are then used by doctors. There's a similar one for police. So the evidence around dealing with crime and what works and what doesn't work, that's all gathered together. There's one for teachers. What happens in the classroom? Should you have 2 teaching assistants or 3? Are bigger class sizes better or smaller? All of that evidence is then turned into something that teachers and school leaders can use. Well, you need something like that in farming, because the individual projects are only really going to benefit those that are directly involved, and the vast majority of farmers aren't going to be directly involved with a research project.
No, I don't want to call them sheep, but they're going to wait for other people to try technology, see that it works, and then adopt it. Then they're not going to be those early adopters.
Yes, there's a well-known kind of innovation adoption curve that is, you can Google, and we need to get beyond the early adopters and into the section where you're getting people that are picking up these new approaches and technologies or new practices, but it's very difficult to achieve that if funders just do project by project funding.
And that's fascinating. If it's okay, Helen, I just want to give everyone a bit of an understanding from us, because I've learned a lot in this area. That we've done a number of broadcasts about some companies, funders looking to come into ag and fresh produce. So the last recession, a number of funds came into agriculture because they saw it as a safe haven. And in this perceived recession that we're in or going into, the same is happening again. That funds that traditionally weren't in ag are coming into ag in the UK and on an international basis, but they're also very interested in the periphery tech element of it. But then, Helen, you have the oddities of the likes of vertical farming, and we just see so many examples of a classic example. There's a client of ours been existing for 30 years, lovely greenhouse business. They suffered a little bit over the pandemic because they lost orders to the retailers because the consumer was not going into store. They went for funding to put some more glass down. 30-year business, been with the same bank for 30 years. They had funding refused to expand their glass. And 10 miles up the road, there was another business that had been existing for 3 years, managed to get £60 million worth of funding to create a dark vertical unit to grow a particular type of soft fruit. They stated to us that if they wanted to go for another 60 million for another site, the bank involved, and it's the same bank, would happily lend to them. And it just seems so short-sighted. It almost feels like someone's had a very slick presentation, and we're going to feed the world with the soft fruit. And there's this very well-established business that was relying on, with this perceived gold rush, you just wonder if there's going to be a lot of attrition from it. So no, I love what you say about that. Actually needs to be a rethink, because all these funders are coming in just looking for short-term gain. They want to spray and pray. They want to invest in 10 things, hoping that one of them is going to be the Facebook equivalent for vertical farming. Yes, it seems a bit confusing. It sounds like they all need to be members of the NFU, Helen, and be educated.
Well, it's just, it's the kind of shining thing that people always love, and they always, there's this idea that things have to be transformational, and I can see that to a point, and I can see that when it comes to the really major challenges that climate change. There's an urgency there. Things need to change, but you do need to work with what you've got, and shiny new things I don't think are going to actually transform the whole sector, which is about producing food for the domestic market. It's not just about kind of microgreens or whatever, but there is, there's that's important as well. I think people are always looking for kind of, the silver bullet to solve everything. And what you need is a variety of approaches, and that's how you're going to get resilience. That you need that kind of wide portfolio of operations. It's a very challenging, terribly challenging sector to be in, and with the levels of uncertainty, with obviously cost inflation, levels of uncertainty around policy and around regulation. It's a tricky time at the moment, and I think,
But Helen, let's be positive. It's also a very positive time sector to be involved in. I've always been educated and taught that in a world war, world recession, world pandemic, if you're in the eating or the cleaning game, you're going to be in a good spot. And we do feel, hopefully, there's this positive hangover from COVID about fresh food consumption, and people getting a better understanding as to where agriculture is coming from. And it was fascinating going to the likes of Groundswell and seeing the younger dynamic that was involved there as well, that the future looks bright in that area. But for you, the most challenging areas that you get involved with, I suppose, that you have to translate to with your NFU hat on, having listened to all the academia.
I mean, I think policy wise, but obviously the basis of it is scientific development. biotechnology has always been the kind of the most emotive and challenging area that I've dealt with. And you know, for a long time that was GM crops largely. And you know, when I first started the NFU, it was kind of the end of the period of those farm scale evaluations. And you know, again, politically interesting times, with Labour in power at that time, being very keen and obviously overseeing those trials, and Conservatives in opposition having to be persuaded. And now it's flipped round, which is very interesting. But you know, that whole area is a really challenging but really interesting in terms of the interplay between the kind of the facts and the evidence and emotions and perceptions and politics with a small and a big P, and different kind of agendas that different groups and people have. And also the fact, I mean, certainly with gene editing now, which has kind of taken over from GM in terms of regulatory progress, and potential in terms of the science, even though it hasn't taken over in terms of actual, you know, what's being produced around the world. It's interesting that it's also bringing out, and I think because of the current context and uncertainty and kind of slight nervousness within the industry, it's bringing out concerns more generally about the kind of power play within the supply chain. So you know, and again, it's an area where we have very different views within the industry, within the NFU membership, but we're able to, you know, we're definitely positive about innovation, positive about biotechnology and what it could provide for the industry, but also looking at people's concerns about what does that actually mean in terms of the businesses that are going to get involved. And what I try and do to kind of tread that balance is really, particularly at the moment, focus on the rules have to be right. So there's regulatory process going through at the moment in terms of gene editing. The rules have to be fit for purpose and enabling. The legislation has to be good. That's an absolute bottom line. And then, you know, what people end up deciding to grow and develop, that's, you know, that's a market issue. But the rules have to be there. And yeah, that's I think that's the most challenging, balancing the leap of imagination that our members have to take. You know, they don't grow GM crops at the moment. There isn't a gene edited crop available for them to choose. So they have to kind of take that leap of imagination and work out what it means to them. And then I have to try and translate those views and ideas about what that could mean for the industry into a plan for how to influence what's going on within government.
Helen, thank you. We're just running out of time. Can Beverly, Christine, Debbie come back in? And just as they're coming back in, Kate Russell's just asked a really interesting question. The number of women in senior positions in the NFU and other agricultural organisations is impressive. But what more can we do to attract women into this industry and to study the subjects that will equip them to do so? Sorry, I haven't got my glasses on. But so, Helen, how can we attract more people into the sector to create the success that you're creating for us within the NFU, please?
Oh, I mean, you know, provide the opportunities. You know, all of our various organisations need to look really carefully at what's required in a particular role. I think. I mean, there's no there's no difference in what men and women can achieve within the industry, particularly. But I do think that that kind of maybe social and emotional intelligence that maybe a lot of women have is actually very important when you're looking at how to influence policy or to influence the way people are thinking. I think, I mean, you know, in terms of kind of logistics, I've got twins. and who were 10. And so I came back to the NFU having had them, and came back and working 3 days a week. And I'm still working 3 days a week. And the NFU enabled that to happen, which made a massive difference to me. So those kind of logistical things, I think flexibility is very important. But just recognising, I really think recognising the different type of approach that women might bring to a question, to a problem, and how valuable that can be. I think that's what employers need to look at.
Yeah,
can I just say,
go, Christine.
Just one of the very first meetings we had of women in food and farming was around a table at the Farmers Club when we had lunch. And it was 12 years ago, and virtually everybody in the room, with the exception of me actually, because I was working at the co-op at the time, was in either communications or something to do with the environment. And if you look back over the previous 2 decades, what had we got drastically wrong in our industry? It's communications and the environment. And it was just interesting that those are areas where women are actually able to bring something to the industry that was missing. And I think that's what we're getting back by having so many more women in it now. Not saying the same jobs as the men, but we should be we need to be there to be ourselves, not to try and do the same job that men do. I
think that authenticity, like I said before, about building relationships. For me, that's how I feel that I've been successful in my career, and in achieving things for our members, is building relationships with people, and that being, you kind of have to be authentic if you're going to build relationships, because people will see through it, or else just be a bit uncomfortable if you're not being authentic to yourself. So
and Tim, if it's okay, I just want to go back to that groundswell example. That's at cereals. You looked at the standard makeup of the individual there, and they're all very nice, but they were white male in the 50s. You go to groundswell, it's a real mix of I'd say folk in the 20s and 30s, and half and half, male female. So to me, there's interesting how there's a real attraction to groundswell, regenerative agriculture, sustainability, regen ag, and if that brings more individuals, especially more females into the sector, that will hopefully help the sector prosper. Just jumping around to Beverly with G's and the size that you are, half a billion pound turnover, and sites in the States and West Africa and Spain and Portugal and Poland. Your relationship with the likes of the NFU, do you lean on them quite heavily, or do you find that you're of a shape and size that you could be that you could be fairly self-sufficient in this policy work and this research work, or do you find that the likes of the NFU invaluable?
We work closely with the NFU on all kinds of subjects, and I find the NFU great at sort of coordinating and bringing everyone together. And when I think across all the various different functions, whether it be people related or science related, the benefit in the round table approach is really helpful. But we do, like Helen pointed out, we do our own research, and we do share that work really with through the cooperative that we've got. So G's Growers, that's one way in which we share it, albeit not as Helen described it. There's a kind of lack of it going across the industry. And also if it comes to writing to government, those sorts of things, we would always contribute to the NFU, and we usually write our own letters as well, to explain where we're coming from.
Yeah, but presumably, Beverly, you don't have a set of Chinese walls. Are you sort of, can't think the right terminology, are you fairly open source? That if
really
you find
open.
That
really
you would like
open.
to share it with them? Because I'm really excited by what Helen was saying in the respect of these funds, that they're just so siloed, and it's all me. Whilst if we've got one example of a client of ours in the fresh sector who are creating a sustainability model, and they've already decided that when they get it and fix it, and they've got a PhD student traveling the world on it now, they're going to make it open source. We will need to see the details of it, but rather than licensing it and trying to make a fast buck on it and flipping it, I don't know, it feels like we need to do more good. There's more good that can be done from the sector if we, here comes the word, collaborate more.
Well, I was just going to add, it's those
Go on, Bev.
principles of open innovation. And I noticed Belinda Clark's on the call. She's an expert in open innovation and talked to kind of some people in G's about that. I've never forgotten it. And those principles, I think, is what we're talking about.
Okay. Christine, Debbie, do we need to see more of this? Can we actually create something out of this conversation with Helen? Can we start a bit of a movement? Can we start a bit of a debate? Christine?
I would like to see, what Helen is talking about, what they do is to try to join up a lot of what is required in the industry. Whereas my local MP was once one of the government ministers. You know, when we had 5 months of different ministers before Boris came in, and he was one of them. And he just said to me, the farming industry make our life so much easier as ministers, because he says we get many different points of view from so many different people and so many different bodies that it's quite easy to actually do nothing. And he said, I used to work in the motor industry, and the motor industry had all got together, decided what they wanted. They lobbied us together, and we had no choice but to do what the industry was asking us to do. So we may well feel that the NFU has got it, but if you ask the DEFRA how many different opinions they get on things, they've got so many talking to them, and we actually almost need to do an NFU plus where we're getting all bits of the industry together, so that we're much more coordinated and focused in our what we're saying to government.
Debbie,
we do that with with some very specific areas. We will do that, and with kind of a bit kind of behind the scenes where we work with our partner organisations, and that can be really valuable. You're so right. A single point of contact is so much easier for them to deal with.
Okay. I want to be told what to do. I mean, you talked about incompetence earlier. It's much easier if we give them the answer on a plate, as opposed to all of us giving them our arguments and expecting them to come up with the right answer.
What has been really difficult though recently with this Future Farming and Countryside programme and with the agricultural transition plan is this kind of new definition of co-design, where it's basically talking to DEFRA wants to engage with individual farmers to design things, and you can see how that, in theory, how that's a nice idea, but each of those individual farmers has their own view and their own particular business circumstance, and that it really, it makes it actually very difficult for us to then engage with DEFRA because we're an organisation. And I mean, I think it came from Michael Gove. Do you remember when he kind of said he didn't want to talk to experts and he didn't want to talk to organisations anymore? He just wants to talk to individuals, and it doesn't kind of work really in practice.
Okay. And Helen, just to make it really easy for people like me, if I could give you a proverbial magic wand, what can we do to make your life and for yourself and your colleagues as easy as possible, as sort of for Christine's and Ferrier? What do you need from us to make you to be able to sing and to get that message over, to create that success that we all want you to create?
I mean, as certainly from the innovation and technology side, I sometimes feel like people only contact the NFU when they're in trouble or there's a problem. So one of the challenges I have is that, I mean, you haven't got endless time to find out what everyone is doing all of the time, but it's really valuable for us to have examples of the kind of innovative activities that are happening within farm businesses, because that really brings the whole thing alive. So the more that our members can share with us the interesting and exciting things that they're doing, then the better, because then we can then amplify that. If we do get asked and expected to know everything, which sometimes that's what happens, we are able to then say, well, we know this particular business is doing this, and so on. So sharing information in a world of information overload, but it's the more we can know about what people are doing, the better, the good stuff. So it's not just about we'll ring the NFU because things are going badly.
Yeah, understood. So I'm just conscious of time. I've got a real googly. I'm sorry for you, Helen, but I've got to ask you this just on WhatsApp. Can Helen predict what's going to happen on a government basis and where farming is going to be with government over the next year, 2 years?
I mean, I think who knows?
Helen, have you got a big whiteboard in the NFU of all the possibilities? That's going to happen.
I mean, the impression I get is that that the food security and actually having a domestic food production system that works and that is resilient is fairly understood and accepted within the political leadership. I think the next Secretary of State will depend very much on who is the Prime Minister, because they've got their friends or the people that they don't get on with. Yeah. I think the speed of change that we're seeing, will only accelerate with cost inflation. I think next year is going to be a bigger issue for businesses even than this year, in terms of their costs. But yeah, I don't expect a kind of massive realization that farming and the rural vote is the most important thing in the next couple of years.
Okay, but again, another reason why we need to support you to get that voice out.
Yeah, I mean, I think a kind of, you almost need a reminder that everybody needs to eat, because I think it's very easy for consumers, but for decision makers within government to not quite realise and not understand where farmers and growers in this country are, how they are part of supplying food to people. And there's a kind of mismatch between retailers and the food supply chain talking about, sourcing British and people being interested in that, and what farmers are being, the kind of signals farmers are getting in terms of actually delivering environmental goods and public goods and services. It's a difficult one, because you need to get those returns from the market for the food in order to do the public good stuff. But a reminder that we all have to eat is probably quite an important message, really.
Debbie, would you like to wrap up for us? I've found that last hour and 35 minutes. Hour and 5 minutes we've overrun. Fascinating. Well, isn't Helen great?
I think that's absolutely great. I've really enjoyed. It's made me think about the NFU and the complexity of trying to represent such a broad church. I totally get Christine's point that it is wonderful when they can represent the industry strongly and positively, particularly with respect to government and the aspects of policy and legislation, which is sort of the nightmare day job from time to time. So I thank Helen very much for her insights, her clarity, her understanding, and I think it's great that you can share that with us, and let's all reflect on it and think what else we can do and how else we can behave. And I do like the idea of having positive case studies that we ought to bring to you to share, because that really is powerful, as opposed to just negative problems, as it were. So thank you very much, Helen, for your time and your energy. It's been great.
Christine, Beverly, anything you want to say before we wrap up?
Beverly, you go first.
Thank you, Max. I could have this conversation all evening, and I was going to talk to you, Helen, about things like what are your aspirations for kind of gene editing and GMO for the new farming paradigm that I see my colleagues working hard on. So all the things that Max was talking about with groundswell and the regenerative agriculture, how would the GMO and or editing fit into all of that? But that's probably another talk, isn't it, Helen?
It is, isn't it?
Thank you.
Talking of other talks, I obviously want to thank Helen for giving up her time today, and it's great. There's such variety of our speakers, and you've had variety, so thank you very much. And just to say that we are planning to do another one of these next, the first Tuesday of September. But the really big thing is the physical meetup on the 26th of September. And anybody who's a member of Women in Food and Farming will get an invite for it, and you can actually sign up for it now. And if you're not a member of Women in Food and Farming, when you go on to Beanstalk Global, you can go down, you'll find a link to join there, and then you can just come along. But it'd be lovely to see lots of people there.
Excellent. And let's see if I can wrap this up succinctly. Christine, is it still raining in Macclesfield? Yes or no?
No, but it's still damp.
Okay. Debbie, have your horses come in, or are they still gallivanting around everywhere?
They're still gallivanting around, they need chasing.
Excellent. Helen, has the combine finished on your right shoulder?
Yeah, and no, all the muck's been spread. No, and no geese yet.
Okay, go back to the combine. Are you going to help with the baling? Are you going to throw some bales around for them? No.
Going to keep away.
Thank you, Helen. And Beverly, I've had a message in. Can we come and pick some Little Gem because we're having a barbecue? This is some friends of mine in Bury St Edmunds.
Really tasty, straight out the field. Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay. We'll be along in 10 minutes. Everyone, thank you very much. Another
thank you, Max.
Fascinating broadcast with women in food and farming on Beanstalk Global. Helen, thank you. Amazing. Thank you, everyone. Keep safe. Thank you.
Thanks, Max.